On this edition of the Newsmakers, trumping the competition, we have the Republican presidential candidate's foreign policy and counter-terror advisor on the show. Also in today's program, thinking outside the box, the search for new solutions to Hong Kong's housing shortage. And in Picture This, the Chicago Cubs win their first World Series in more than a century, breaking the Billy Goat curse. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. There's less than a week to go until the US presidential election. And while the candidates try to drum up support across the country with a final series of rallies, attention is still focused on what the prospective presidents will do if they win. Republican candidate Donald Trump has promised to shake up American foreign policy, while the Democrats' Hillary Clinton appears to be a vote for more of the same. Today's newsmaker is Donald Trump, as we ask whether he can turn his foreign policy promises into reality.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
I call it extreme vetting.
If I'm elected president, I am going to keep radical Islamic terrorists the hell out of our country.
I say the first thing we have to do is get rid of ISIS before we start thinking about Syria.
Your 2 minutes
I don't
is up.
like Assad at all, but Assad is killing ISIS. Russia is killing ISIS, and Iran is killing ISIS. And those three have now lined up because of our weak foreign policy.
Saddam Hussein was a bad guy, right? He was a bad guy, really bad guy. But you know what he did well? He killed terrorists. He did that so good. They didn't read him the rights. They didn't talk. They were a terrorist. It was over. When I become president, the days of treating Israel like a second-class citizen will end on day one. Unlike other candidates for the presidency, war and aggression will not be my first instinct. You cannot have a foreign policy without diplomacy.
Well, helping me understand Trump's foreign policy plan is Walid Phares. He advises the Republican candidate on counter-terror and foreign policy matters and joins me now from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. How does it compare now in 2016 to back in 2012 when you were advising Mitt Romney on his presidential campaign?
Well, certainly the circumstances have changed radically, won't you admit, between 2011-12, when I served with Governor Romney, and now there has been a series of upheavals in the region, and 4 civil wars are going on, an Iran deal, a situation in Turkey that is very, very difficult in the south, and of course the migrants, and beyond that, a change of policy with regard to Russia on behalf of the Obama administration. Having said that, this massive change obviously is going to impose a different set of directions by a forthcoming, hopefully, Trump administration when he wins next Tuesday. The change will deal with the changes on the ground, but he has major principles that he announced, not necessarily in statements that we can put in a montage, but in a March of this year foreign policy speech and an August foreign policy speech. And obviously, when he's elected, he's going to be surrounded by the agencies of government. Now he has advisors, but then he will have the actual input of agencies of government.
Okay, and let's sort of tease these out as we go along. But I just want to stick on Romney for just a second, because Romney himself called Trump a con man, a fake, a phony, and a fraud. How do you square that, given that you were advising Romney back in, 4 years ago, and now you're advising Trump? Romney doesn't trust him. Romney doesn't like him. Why are you so convinced Trump's the man?
Oh, that's very easy. Romney himself, my ex-boss, has praised them so much in 2012. This is politics, and I'm sure you understand that sometimes they come together, sometimes they differ. Romney in 2016 is, of course, not running for election, but he has a breakdown with Mr. Trump. The current nominee is Mr. Trump, and we are supporting him, and we're trying to do the best we can for the American people and for the international community once he's elected.
In as simple a way as possible, help me understand what the Muslim ban means. It went from total and complete shutdown to extreme vetting. What does that mean? Does that mean, I have a visa? Does that mean I won't be allowed into the United States unless I prove I'm not a terrorist somehow?
This is a criticism which I call basically is now in a different time zone. When you begin with the statement he made back in December, which he meant differently. He meant that he doesn't want to see jihadists here. He meant he didn't want to see people who are extremists and can do to America what they're doing to Turkey or to Saudi or to Iraq or to other countries. He did not express it the way he is now expressing it. He just did a general ban. But now he has been, as you just said in the introduction, very precise. He wants to deal with and work with the leaders in the Arab and Muslim world. He wants to narrow that ban just to focus on those who are radicals. That's exactly what many people in the Middle East are doing, as well as in Europe. So the concern about the statement he made back in December does not exist anymore at this point in time.
Yes, but he said people coming from countries that have terrorism. Help me understand that. What does that mean? Does that mean Muslims coming from countries that have ISIS problems, or Muslims coming from countries that produce ISIS fighters?
No more Muslims are at the table in terms of ban. This is over. So we're not going to go back to that. What he means basically, and of course when he will have the help of the agencies, is to work with these governments. The governments that are fighting ISIS and the jihadists and the collection of organizations that are doing so in the region will be our partners, will be the partners of the United States in determining, meaning if there are jihadists moving from either Turkey or Saudi coming to the United States, the expectation is that the U.S. and these countries will be cooperating to detect, exactly as it is happening now between Europe and the United States. So he wants to make sure that we have an international web that will intercept the move of these radicals into the United States.
I mean, what you're saying is that, and I take you as somebody who's representing his views, is that he disavows the Muslim ban, because what you're saying has nothing to do with the Muslim ban. So why hasn't he said it? Why are you telling me this?
That's a different question. That's a question that we'll have to ask him, what are the circumstances. We were not the advisors at the time. That was made in December. We came the advisors in March. But what I'm trying to explain to you is his concern. If you look at his history, that's the best way probably for the audience to understand. He has not ever had any article or book or statement made on any ban. He has been accused of being an Islamophobe and a racist and anti. You do that if you have, like in Europe, those extreme right-wing forces that have an ideology that are against or with certain groups. Mr. Trump is a businessman, and the principle for a businessman is to have as many people working with. So the way he expressed it was not what he wanted, and then he corrected it throughout 9 months, including in official foreign policy speeches. Beyond that, one has to ask him where this narrative come from.
Does it bother you that it seems as if he thinks you, his advisor, who is not a Muslim, is a Muslim? Does it bother you that he thinks you're a Muslim?
Look, we could find as many as you want of snags, and then he may have made a statement and others. Yeah, we could discuss it as long as you want. But what the American people is looking for and what the international community is looking for are about policies. It bothers me or not bothers me, I will write it in my memoirs. But basically, what he's trying to do right now is to elevate the debate in the United States in his foreign policy speeches, getting ready for meeting with leaders of the Arab and Muslim world.
He's using it as a badge of honor, he's using it as a credential. Let's just listen to, I've got a little clip of him on Fox News. Listen to this for just a second, and we'll talk after that.
You don't have a problem with Muslims. In fact, you just hired one, Walid Phares, to work for you. You know, we just talked to Walid Phares. We talked to Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Yesterday, Ambassador Khalilzad done great things for this country. What do all three have in common? They're Muslims. The key to unwinding the Muslim
He had the opportunity twice, sir, to correct the host. Both times he said yes when it was mentioned that you're a Muslim. He's using it as a badge of honor to say, hey, I don't have a problem with Muslims because I hire a Muslim, Walid Phares. You're a Maronite Christian from Lebanon. You're a brown man. You're an Arab. But he thinks you're a Muslim. I ask you again, does it not bother you that he's using that to say, I don't have a problem with Muslims when you're not Muslim?
We're spending so much time on a little detail when in the morning, there was a show in the morning, and he was asked by one of the hosts, if he has a problem having Muslim advisor or working with them, and he mentioned me, the host basically made the mistake, and which he corrected. If you can also broadcast the second segment of that interview, and the host said, I am sorry, Walid Phares is not a Muslim, and therefore we made a mistake. If you add that, then the audience will understand that this is only a little snip of
but
the
I'm not putting
entire
the host.
show.
I'm not putting the host in the spotlight here. I'm putting Donald Trump in the spotlight because both times he says clearly yes when it's mentioned that you're a Muslim. People say he has a problem with Islam. They call him an Islamophobe and so on and so forth. It's not for me to judge. But when he says, yes, Walid Phares is a Muslim, I'm asking you, as a Lebanese Maronite Christian, if you have a problem with that, you can't tell me you're comfortable with that when he's using that as a badge of honor for his foreign policy.
I really don't understand your concern and what are you building right here. Because Mr. Trump was asked, are you okay with your advisors? And they're all three Muslims. And then he may not have paid enough attention. It was about 10 seconds. And you're going to make it into a political, philosophical, strategic position. Up to you and up to the audience to judge the importance of that point.
Okay, let's move on. Has it been hard work trying to educate Mr. Trump on the region? Given you've said he's a businessman, has it been hard work trying to inform him and educate him on all the different stuff that's going on?
Good question. Let me share a little bit of my experience. Number one, Mr. Trump is an international businessman. He has met way more than other candidates, prime ministers, ministers, heads of states, kings, princes, others, as a businessman. So he has an idea since the 80s, that 30 years, about how the international community functions, probably from the economic perspective. He had some knowledge also about the political one. But yes, he has been advised by people who have served in the administrations, in 3 administrations, and 1 campaign, including, since we spoke about the Romney campaign, many are serving with him at this point in time. So he is learning that process in the same way. Senator Obama, who has not had a long experience in politics, defeated Senator McCain, who was in Congress for many decades. Madam Clinton, who basically had no experience in an international field at all, her husband defeated, George Bush I, who was the head of the CIA and vice president. So the American public understand what they are choosing. They know that Mr. Trump did not serve in government in the same way that President Reagan was not.
Okay, I just want to go back. I want to go back to whether it's been hard work educating on the region, because a year ago in September 2015, when talking to Hugh Hewitt, who doesn't pull any punches, Hugh Hewitt asked Trump whether he was familiar with General Qasem Soleimani, the head of Iran's Quds Force from the Revolutionary Guards Corps. Trump made a suggestion that he thought that Soleimani was a Kurdish leader in Iraq or Syria. He started talking about the Kurds. So I ask you again, I think President Obama, before he was president, would have known the difference. Has it been hard work? A year down the line, do you think Trump now knows who General Qasem Soleimani is?
Let me disagree a little bit with you. I don't think Senator Obama, if he was alone, without advisor, on an interview, being asked about Boko Haram, being asked about Öcalan in Turkey, he would have been narrating about it. I don't think so. You know, our presidents and politicians here are very much backed by their advisors. See, if you are making the point that advisors are not doing a good job because they're not telling him who Soleimani is.
But you're deflecting to Obama. I'm asking you about Trump now. I'm asking you about Trump now. Do you think he now knows who General Qasem Soleimani is?
Sure, now he knows who he is, but you can ask him about the 13th Division General in the old Soviet Union or somebody, and then he may not know.
Okay, let me ask you something.
You could pull the same thing.
Let's bring up something more simple then.
About other presidents, including in Turkey or in Mongolia.
Okay, let's take something more simple then, directly related to policy statements he has made. He's made statements about Hezbollah. He's made statements about Iran. He's made statements about Lebanon. He's made statements about Israel and the Palestinians. He also, in the same interview with Hugh Hewitt, didn't know the difference between Hamas and Hezbollah. When Hewitt asked him if he's going to learn the difference, he said, he'll learn it when it's appropriate. I will know more about it than you know, and believe me, it won't take me long. So 1 year on, 13 months on, or 14 months since that interview, does he now know the difference between Hamas and Hezbollah, sir?
He certainly does. But let me remind you also that Mr. Trump is among the first ones, months ago, who, when asked about Syria, do you have a solution? He said, yes, of course. We want to have a secure zone for the migrants or for the refugees. He said we want to solve that issue. Very few, including his opponents, are talking about how to solve Syria. So that is something that the people in the United States and people in Syria and the Arab world are looking for. I mean, there is a mind game and games that we could go on for another year. But basically what people are interested in are his policies. What does he have in his box for Syria, for Iraq,
his
for the
policies
Iran
are going to be
deal,
based
for
on
Turkey?
whether he's
That's the
informed,
serious
right?
discussion, not the mind games and word
sorry,
games.
this is not a mind game, but I mean, surely his policies are going to be informed on whether he knows the difference, and it's a stark one, between Hamas and Hezbollah. So isn't it important that he does know the difference?
Of course it is, but it's a learning process. I mean, a president, when he wakes up in the morning, what do you think he does? He reads this one report that comes, it's 2 pages, that comes from the national intelligence community, where they give him all the details. And then throughout the day in the presidency, should it be President Obama or President Reagan or President Bush, it's the same thing. There is a whole machinery in this state.
Okay, so why do we have to vote for Trump then? Why do we have to vote for Trump then? Because it's the agencies.
Is choosing. Yes, but that's how democracies function. Agencies will start giving the input once he is a president. Now, they're not voting on agencies. They're voting on the judgment of either Mr. Trump or Madam Clinton with regard issues in the region. A majority now, this morning, as you can see in the polling, would choose Mr. Trump over his future decisions, not after, after what he has been doing over the 30 years as a businessman. That's the choice they have.
Walid Phares, good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us. Still to come on the Newsmakers, shaking the cage. We look at the housing shortage in Hong Kong. And in Picture This, baseball's lovable losers make history with their first World Series win in 108 years. Hong Kong is one of the world's richest places with a globally leading financial center. But that status comes at a cost. The Chinese-administered territory has one of the world's most unaffordable housing markets and income inequality unparalleled in the developed world. More than a quarter of the territory's 7 million inhabitants live in state-provided accommodation. And there's a growing number on the waiting list. The Newsmakers' Natalie Perhernan reports.
Beyond Hong Kong's bustling streets and behind an unassuming door lies another side of the city. These are tiny cubicles where people are living, crammed in with what possessions they have. Wong Jua has been in one for more than 20 years.
三生一宿，係㗎啦，係咁㗎啦。依家你仲想你60幾歲人，你仲想有咩嘢期望啫？係咪先？食得飽住得暖就算㗎啦。佢政府幫你咧，佢又唔會餓親你，唔會餓親你。咁佢又俾你住，所以都算係咁㗎啦。
He's unemployed and relies on government assistance to get by.
我哋就申請緊公共房屋嘅，咁佢依家話排期都要排3年幾4年，我已經申請咗2年啦，咁咪有等咯，冇辦法。
Wong is just one of the 286,500 applicants for public housing. The Hong Kong Housing Authority already provides homes for more than 2 million people out of the territory's 7 million. Housing is a complex numbers game, and the city's poorest are paying for it. The financial hub is one of the world's richest regions, but not everyone can get ahead, as there's huge wealth disparity here. The average income of the richest 10% is about 29 times that of the poorest, and that gap is widening. The latest report on poverty shows that 1.34 million people live below the government's official poverty line, the highest figure since 2009. Poverty combined with a lack of housing has also created McRefugees, people who cannot afford to live anywhere, so they sleep in 24-hour McDonald's restaurants. The availability of land, influence of property developers, and an aging workforce are just some of the other challenges which contribute to the chronic shortage of affordable housing. The territory's chief executive, Leung Chun-ying, has repeatedly pledged to alleviate poverty and address the housing shortage. His online welcome message says we can build a better home for 7 million people, a more prosperous, progressive and righteous Hong Kong. But for many, that remains a dream, kept in cages. Natalie Pohanen, The Newsmakers.
Xiu Tian joins me now from Porto. She's an urban planner and the author of the China Urban Development blog. Thanks so much for joining us. I mean, this is crazy. Mac refugees, cage homes. It's unbelievable to read about this stuff and to watch it, you know, given that it's happening in Hong Kong, a place that's so rich. I was looking at an article criticizing development plans for 61.4 square foot homes. And when you compare it to jail cells, the average jail cell is 80.7 square feet. Does that put all of this into perspective, that Hong Kong has a massive problem? And even in trying to solve the problem, people are going to be living in terrible, tight little boxes.
Yes, so there is a huge disparity between the rich and the poor, and that's the problem that Hong Kong is facing.
How do you solve that?
Well, so there's income disparity. It's hard. It's too big of a topic for me to address. But coming to affordable living, affordable housing, and the government is actually delivering a lot of public estates. So the housing authority right now manages 177 public estates. And it houses actually a third of the population. Over 2 million of Hong Kong population actually lives in subsidized housing. But at the same time, it is just not enough. So, you know, there's a few ways that we can address that, but all of them are going to be very challenging because Hong Kong is very landlocked. But at the same time, you know, the land is definitely not used to its maximum potential. If you look at it, there's also an industrial area in Hong Kong that is mostly vacant or somewhat vacant, but could not be turned into residential land use. So if the government could relax the regulation on how to transform certain land use to, you know, house low-income families or house more residential use as residential usage, it would solve part of the problem. And also at the same time, the government is doing it alone. The government is trying to build more estates to house more low-income family. But, you know, there's a lot more potential if they could bring along private developers, create more public-private cooperation. So in terms of, you know, giving more tax incentives for private developers to build more that could actually house low-income or even moderate-income families, that would help the housing issue.
The Development Minister, Paul Chan Mo-po, said, quote, "The government does not have a magic wand to create land out of nothing." That seems to suggest that the government believes that, you know, space is an issue. You're saying it's not as much of an issue as they claim, but they're saying, hey, supply and demand, we don't have much space. What are we going to do? We have a tiny country and lots of people.
Right. So as I said, I didn't say it's not an issue. It is actually the most important issue here is that there is not enough land. But it is not an excuse to say that we have already used 100% of the land to its maximum potential. So there's also efficiency that we can really try and figure out in the city where there's existing land that is not being used. Or if it's more important to house families, low-income families, or it is more important to use this land to build office development or commercial development. There is a balance that we can try and, you know, make this issue a little better, but I'm not saying it's not an issue that Hong Kong as a city is very landlocked.
Okay, well clarified. Xiu Tian, thanks so much for helping shed some light on a surprising situation in Hong Kong, which, as we said, is quite a wealthy country. Thanks so much for joining us. In today's Picture This, the Chicago Cubs have won baseball's World Series for the first time in more than a century. The lovable losers, as they became known, had suffered decades of disappointment and several near misses. Let's take a look. You've been watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garta. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.